afternoon to all of you. Thank you very much for joining us for this session on the Sustainable Development Goals. And it's a pleasure to have received the invitation from Thailand Sustainability Expo organizers, ThaiBev and all their partners for this event. I'm very honored also to share this afternoon with our colleagues and friends from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs who will be zooming in on Thailand, of course, and I will try to bring you to a voyage around sustainability from the international level. I'm the representative of UNDP, one of the many agencies that are based in Thailand working for the Thai people on UN values and promoting sustainability. We've been here for about 50 years now, so a long partnership, a long friendship between the organization and the country. And a very special moment full of uncertainties, as we all know. But as we always say in development, challenges bring opportunities, and I guess this is the most important. Now, you know, we could do this through a quiz system, because I'm sure you are already quite familiar with what I will present to you. But very quickly, the first question, who knows what happened 6 days ago? 6 days ago, on the 25th of September 2020. I'll give you a hint. It was a birthday. I should actually say an anniversary. It was the 5th anniversary of the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals by UN member states, including Thailand. So 5 years ago, the international community met in New York and agreed on a new reference framework that is going to be with us for the next 10 years now, at the time 15 years. So what are those Sustainable Development Goals? The first thing, before going into the goals, I want to introduce you to this reference framework and to just narrate in a few seconds the story of humanity. We live on a planet called Earth, and there are increasingly a number of people on this planet. And of course, the objective of those people is to live happily, but also in prosperity. And for prosperity, there are a few key ingredients that are necessary. The first one is, of course, that we want to live peacefully. And in order to live peacefully, we need to, of course, get along with each other as individuals, as organizations, as entities, and therefore partnerships are absolutely critical. So in about, I didn't time myself, but about less than a minute, I've told you the stories of the 5 P's that underpin, another P, the SDGs. Planet, people, prosperity, peace, and to make all this work, constructive and positive partnerships. And so this philosophy, another P, led to the 17 goals. Now, those goals, you know, have been ultra simplified through those icons so that people would remember them. But one interesting element is that historically, this is the first time in the history of mankind that the international community was successful in convincing 193 countries to agree on a common agenda, from the smallest country in the world to the largest, from the richest to the poorest. All of those countries agreed that together they would work independently, but also as a community, to achieve 7 objectives. And the beauty of those goals is that till now, and I do this every day of my life for the last 20 years, I have never met anyone who is against any of those goals. When you think of this, it tells you the power that those goals can have to mobilize people, to motivate people towards a better planet, more prosperity, happier people, all this through peace and partnerships. So those goals, you can see them there. You'll find them all over those 3 floors around this expo, because a lot of the participants to the expo have declined their activities around and how they contribute to each of those goals. Now, 17 goals, that's not too difficult to remember, although it takes a little bit of practice. And we usually do this a lot with students. We end up with a little quiz to see if they have remembered all those goals. But behind those goals are 169 targets. I'll show you some of them. And behind those targets, you have indicators to measure the progress that countries are making against the goals. Now, 3 key messages around the goals that are very important to remember. First of all, they are universal, meaning that they apply to every country, to every nation. Right? And this is, again, a big first, because, you know, in the discourse around development, very often you have the North versus the South, those who are developed versus those who are developing. Whereas the SDGs have this particularity that irrespective of the level of development of the country, each one of those member states of the UN has to work towards achievement of the goals. And none of them, irrespective of their wealth and their level of advancement, can actually claim today that they've achieved them. Right? So it's very much universal. The second one is the principle of integration. They are 17 goals, each of them, of course, different from one another, but it will be absolutely impossible to achieve the goals independently from one another. What I mean by that is that each of those goals are very much interlinked to the others. Just my little story of the 5 Ps. Right? So you can take any of those goals, and you will, if you start unpacking the goal, you will realize that in order to have achievements against that goal, you will need to also work on the other goals. Right? So it's a 17 entity, but it's a package. Right? And that's very important to appreciate, because it means something at the level of implementation. It means that whether you are an individual, a private sector company, a government, a ministry, you cannot achieve the goals unless you work with others who are more responsible, more expert on their specific goal. And the third key idea behind those goals is transformational. What do we mean by that? We mean that we cannot just by incremental little progress achieve the vision of Agenda 2030 and the vision, the inspiration, the aspiration of sustainability. It takes transformation. So at the level of individual, usually it means what? It means not only a change in behavior, but it means a change in mindset. It means that you transform yourself through processes if you really want to achieve those goals. That is true, and I will show it to you later, for businesses. It is true also for governments. Other key principles that are underpinning the Agenda 2030. First of all, as I said to you earlier, I've never met anyone who's against any of those goals. Why? Because they are fundamentally based on our rights, our human rights. Who doesn't want access to education, to affordable health care, to a clean environment, to a decent job? These are aspirations, but beyond aspiration, humanity has actually enshrined those aspirations into international law, convention, treaties. So they are very much based on human rights. I've mentioned to you the universality. What it also means is that achieving those goals cannot and should not be let alone for the wealthy people. We should make sure that everybody in society benefits from the achievement of the goals. And that's the principle of leaving no one behind. It means that as countries progress, if you only keep it and you look at it from a statistical perspective and you use averages, you may run the risk that out of this average, some individuals, even sometimes some whole sectors of society, fall through the cracks, get forgotten. You know, it's the image of this train that's left the station, but you still have some of the passengers that were staying on the platform and the train is gone. Right? So we need to make sure, and this is very much where we as UNDP, in a country that is going, that is not only very committed to the SDGs, but is making very quick progress on a lot of the goals, we need to make sure that everybody in Thailand and around the world benefits and is included in action towards the goal. And I thought I would also mention, because this is very important, the value of gender equality. And here underline that it is not only a binary issue, right? We don't look only at male and female, but all genders, right? And of course, we also know that in Thailand and in many other countries, we need to ensure women empowerment. Now, where are we globally when it comes to 5 days down the road in the achievement? Let's look at this slide. And this is, I think I have a little, I'm not sure I have this on, maybe this work? No, this doesn't work. Anyway, difficult to show you, but anyway. This is 2015, right? This is where we were when they were adopted. This is more or less today. So ideally, we should see all 35 of those boxes, which are only an extract of the 169 targets. This is where they should all be, right? The reason I want to show you this slide is to show you that how uneven the progress has been globally on the goals. And this is important because it shows us and it tells us where our efforts should go so that the goals that are, or the targets that are lagging behind, can be more quickly catching up on the others. So let's start with the good news. The good news is that we have some of the targets of the SDGs for which action has been taken, and sufficiently so that we are even sometimes ahead of schedule. Right? So we have good news, for example, under health, on maternal mortality and child mortality. Because more and more people have access to better health care, we are able to secure better lives for mothers and young children. And that's, of course, very, very important. Now, the story gets a little bit less good because as those children become adults, then they face other problems where we're not doing as well, right? And as you can see, the worst, I guess the most important message in this slide is that for some of the targets, we actually get it completely wrong. Because not only are we not on track to achieve the targets, but unfortunately, we are going the wrong way, right? And this is, on this side of the slide, you can see some of the targets, like safe housing, on 13 on climate change, on access to justice. We are actually going in reverse track, the opposite of what we want as a global humanity. Now, this is at the global level, right? For each country, for each community, it would be a different image, right? But just if you're interested, I would refer you to the most recent SDG Progress Report 2020, published by the Regional Commission for Asia and Pacific, which is hosted here in Thailand. And you will see a country profile for Thailand, and I'll give you a scoop so that maybe you get even more excited to look into it. I'll tell you that for Thailand, the goals that are on that side of the slide are goals that refer to inequality, SDG 10, SDG 13 on climate change, and SDG 16 on peace, rule of law, justice, and strong institutions. So these are the goals that would merit more attention, more investments on the side of the actors in Thailand to make sure that progress is more even. Now, COVID. Difficult to talk today to anyone about anything without mentioning, of course, COVID. And COVID is not giving us good news. As you can see, and here I'm sorry the slide is a little bit difficult, but you have to look at the color scheme that is more or less in the middle here and on the far left of the slide. And it refers to the scale that's in the middle. So ideally, you know, we would want to see some greens, but as you can see, there's nothing that is green. Why? Because COVID is challenging the success and the progress that we were making on the SDGs. It is at best stopping. For many goals, it is actually reversing. Right? So it's more orange and reds that you can see, with some parts that remain gray because it's still too early to see. Now, some of you may say, oh, but we heard that, for example, in Samui, more turtles laid eggs than any time before because of the absence of tourists and the calm and the peacefulness that Samui had. True. This is why the SDGs that are relative to the environment, 13, 14, 15, are gray. Right? Air quality has improved because industries have stopped. Right? Now, if you look at them independently, you could say maybe that's good news. Well, number one, it's very temporary, well, we hope. Right? Number two, there's a risk that actually the urgency of restarting the economy to recreate the jobs that we all need may lead to decisions that would not take a long time perspective, but a short-term profit gain, and therefore measures to limit air pollution or negative impact on the environment might be a little bit pushed aside to prioritize job creation, for example. Right? So a lot of question marks around 13, 14, 15. But as you can see, overall, it is a pretty gloom picture that COVID is giving us. Now, here I've called the slide, the few slides more, I wanted to show you what do countries in general do, and of course I've decided to choose the example of Thailand, which for you will be, I think, more relevant and meaningful. This is the roadmap that the government and the next speaker is better able than me to speak about this, but very quickly, Thailand has established the National Sustainable Development Council, which is the highest governing body to manage progress of country on the SDGs. It is chaired by the Prime Minister and has a lot of the line ministries in the council. It meets on a regular basis, and they've identified those key areas of work. Right? So from awareness raising all the way to monitoring and reporting, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is doing a great job at producing what we call voluntary national reports on the SDGs on a very regular schedule, and bringing this to the international community to show the progress that Thailand is making. I'll take you very quickly through the various steps. We won't spend too much time on them, but just to highlight why all this is so important. One of the key messages, and we'll come back to it at the end, is that for sustainable development goals to increase their chances of achievement, sometimes when I talk to people about the SDGs, they look at me and say, you and your goals. And that's the first mistake. They are not my goals. It's not because I speak about them that they're mine. They belong to the international community. They belong to the countries that have endorsed them at the General Assembly. But beyond the countries, it is not only for the government to be responsible for achieving the goals. If you go back to what those goals are, you'll see that a lot of those goals are beyond government's capacity. Think of job creation. It's not the responsibility of the government to create all the jobs for the whole country. Right? They have a role to play, of course, but business, private sector, the economy is first and foremost responsible. Right? So what we're trying to say here is awareness raising is critical because one needs to understand that the responsibility to achieve the goals and the effort to be put in the implementation of those goals are everybody's business. All of you here in this room, irrespective of what you do, your age, your gender, your function in society, you have a role to play. You can make a difference in terms of achieving the goals. Integrated planning meaning that countries, as they move along on their development pathway, should align that pathway in a way that will integrate the goals. We're not suggesting, as the UN, that countries take special measures, special plans, but we would want them to integrate in their own national plan the goals, so that we make sure that the paths merge, right? And the efforts go in the same direction. In Thailand, this is largely the case. We see in the 20-year vision, the strategy, the regular plans that the National Economic and Social Development Council puts forward, the plans are always integral and the goals are easily recognizable in those plans. The next challenge is to push this at local level, right? To go at subnational level and ensure that municipalities, provinces in Thailand do the same. Laws and institutions. This is very important because if your parliament votes laws and puts up a legislative framework that in any way hinders the achievement of the goals, then of course this is going to be a problem, right? So here, a lot of work is being done with parliamentarians, with the House of Representatives, to make sure that draft laws that are being prepared not only are aware of the goals, but actually create a conducive environment for their achievement. In the same way, an institutional setup, I've mentioned one already, the National Sustainable Development Committee, are very, very important for a better coordination of all the activities and the work towards the goal. It is true in the government sector. It is also very true in the private sector. Some of you may have heard that Thailand established a Thailand Responsible Business Network in December last year. An effort of a lot of the big companies in Thailand listed in the stock exchange to get together and to coordinate their action towards the achievement of the SDGs. Right? So again, a demonstration that this institutional setup is not only confined to the role of the government. Now, this is the scary part, because achieving the goal is beautiful in concept, but represents a very serious investment. Right? We estimate that we need between 5 to 7 trillion US dollars per year for the next 10 years to achieve the goals. Now, some of you may say, oh my God, if I translate this in baht, this is a huge amount of money. Well, the good news is that this money is available. It is here already. The problem is it's in the wrong place. Right? It's in coffers, it's in investment plans. Some of those investment plans are not even aligned to the SDGs. So the issue is not about creating more and identifying more sources of financing. It's about redirecting the existing financing that is available to the international community towards the right objective. For this, and if you bring this back at the level of a country, you need to very much cost the goals. So you need to know where you are today, where you want to be in 2030, and how much this is going to cost you. And then you can start looking at the financing sources. So that's quite a technical exercise that is critical, and this underlines the very important role of the Ministry of Finance in this exercise. Implementation is the core of it, right? And this again is true for any government investment project, any business investment project, any individual action. If some of you have a little brother or a little sister, and you spend 1 hour of your time during the week to help him or her get better in maths, or in Thai, or in English, I can sit down to you and show you how this contributes to the SDGs. Now, you'll tell me, oh, you're really stretching it. Yes, I am. But the key message is this: unless all of us are in action mode, we'll not get there. The final point is on monitoring and reporting, and this is important because it tells us where we are at. And to know where you want to go, well, you first need to know where you're at. Right? So these are the national reports that are being produced by the government. These are the conversations that we're having in terms of what is the ambition for the following year, for the next 10 years, so that we achieve the goals. And very importantly, it's the breakdown of progress per goal, per target, using the indicators to tell us where should we invest, what should we prioritize, at what level, and therefore who is needed to take the action. So that's for the roadmap, and I want to zoom in. This I've told you how action is absolutely critical, but the last one, because we are in an event that is being organized by the private sector, I wanted to also show you how all this is very much in line with the history of what we used to call a long time ago philanthropy of companies. Right? So you had big private sector investors who were making a lot of money, and because they had enough money for everything they wanted, felt, oh, I can give a little bit to charities. Right? This started many, many years ago. And then we invented the concept of corporate social responsibility. It was a way of professionalizing at the level of the company this empathy, this solidarity, this charity concept that we wanted to help others because we were successful, to share a little bit. Right? And then we moved to ESG, the famous ESG, environment, social governance. Today, in Thailand, it is by law mandatory for every company to prepare an ESG report. Right? So again, it shows the dedication of the country to those concepts. But today, what we want to push for is to broaden ESG to the SDGs. Right? In ESG, you find those three pillars that very much are aligned with the SDGs, but the SDGs allow you to go even deeper, to a level of more details, more sophistication in measuring not only what you give, but what you create as an impact. Right? Because it's not only sufficient to, I'll give you an easy example to understand. You dig a well, right? Because you want to bring water to a community that is deprived of potable water. So you dig that well. And then you move back, right? You forget about the well. But if you haven't planned for maintenance, for example, that well one day will stop working. Right? And if maintenance has not been budgeted, has not been planned, then it will stop. Or you've dug the well where there's actually very little water underground, right? Because you haven't done the necessary research and studies before. Right? So what is important is not the fact that you build the well. What is important is the end result, which is to bring the water to the people, which is your intention. But if you focus on the well, you run the risk of missing the impact that you want to have, which is providing water. Right? So SDG impact for us is really the next frontier, if you wish, of the role of businesses as they do their commitments. So in conclusion, these are the 4 messages that I would like you, if I may ask, you to keep with you and maybe digest, rethink, and hopefully decide to take action. The first one is that even if we are making progress, as you have seen on a majority of the targets and the objectives of the goals, this progress, the pace of progress is not enough. We need to go faster, and therefore we need to mobilize more people, more resources to achieve the goals. Even more so, and that's the second message, because COVID-19 is really hindering our progress. But at the same time, it's forcing us to rethink. It's forcing us to rethink the balancing between the 5 Ps that I've showed you at the very beginning, especially the Ps between people and planet. We know where COVID came from. And we know that in countries, including in Thailand, where one of the reasons why Thailand has been so successful is because it's been endowed by so much beauty and so much wealth from nature. The reason why you have so many tourists coming to Thailand is because you have a beautiful nature that people want to come and see. But it's this balancing between the prosperity of the individuals and the preservation of this environment that is so critical. So COVID really gives us that lesson. The third key message that I want you to keep in mind is this concept that unless all of us appreciates and gets ready to commit action for the SDGs, it will be very difficult to achieve them. You cannot be a spectator. You cannot sit, relax in your chairs like you are now, and look at countries and people making effort and hoping that you would benefit. It needs all of us to take action, and this is what we call the concept of whole of society approach to the achievement of the goals. And the final one is for our friends from the private sector. We have now been able to demonstrate very clearly that investing in SDGs for a business is not about charity, it's not about feeling good. It is really about doing well because it will bring profit by doing good for society, because ultimately it is a virtual cycle that will come back for their benefit. I hope you can remember those 4 messages, and I'm sure the next speaker will give you more to remember in his presentation. Thank you very much for your attention, and I apologize that I haven't been able to say all this in Thai, but for this you will have to come back in 2030. ขอบคุณครับ
ขอบคุณค่ะ Thank you very much Mr. Renaud. Meyer, please remain on the stage. May I invite คุณต้องใจธนชานันท์ Managing Director of ASEAN to kindly present a token of our appreciation to the guest speaker.